The Brazilian Grand Prix had it all. A first 1-2 of the season for Mercedes, an incredible recovery drive from Leclerc, and of course, Red Bull drama. Things are boiling over between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez as the Dutchman defied team orders to hinder Sergio's chances of a P2 finish in the Drivers' Championship. In today's video, we're going to see why Verstappen pulled off that move and the Mexican's reaction. So keep watching. First off, this feud has been coming since Monaco. Interlagos never fails to deliver, and this one was no different. From Kevin Magnussen's insane pole to George Russell's maiden Grand Prix victory, this was an instant Formula One classic. Despite all the great stories coming out of the weekend in Brazil, though, we're left here focusing on something very negative. Of course, it's the fact that Max Verstappen didn't allow Perez to pass him just to get a couple of extra points for his P2 bid in the Drivers' Championship. Now, this would have made sense if there was a podium on the line for the Dutchman, or a 15th win of the season. But the baffling thing about this move was that they were both in P6 and P7 positions. That didn't even matter to Verstappen. Like, he has already won the championship, and an extra point or two doesn't help him. The Mexican, on the other hand, is still neck and neck with Charles Leclerc on the points table. Obviously, it left everyone wondering why someone like Max would even pull off such a petty move. Didn't the two teammates have a good relationship? Well, now that the dust has settled, the truth has finally started to come out. Apparently, this feud has been brewing for a while now, and it all goes back to Monaco, when Perez crashed during qualifying to end up with a pole position. Back then, it seemed like a harmless crash that was totally out of his control. Now that it's all boiled over, however, we finally know the sinister truth. Up next, Perez's Monaco crash was deliberate. It was honestly pretty bizarre to hear Max Verstappen be so harsh over the radio. Of course, we've seen him lose control over his emotions time and time again. This time, though, there was almost a hint of stubbornness that we haven't seen from the Dutchman before. For instance, when his race engineer told him to let Checo through, he didn't respond. And when the engineer asked him what had happened, the 25-year-old just imploded. "Told you already last time, guys. Don't ask me again, okay?" he said in a very angry tone. The two-time champion then proceeded to clarify that he's given his reasons and he's not going to change. Now, his message was pretty vague, and he didn't go into any specifics, but it was pretty clear that this had already been discussed internally with the team. And guess what? He was indeed talking about Monaco. You see, when Perez crashed out on the street circuit, Verstappen was on the track to set the fastest lap and get pole position. So it seems like the Mexican deliberately crashed to retain his provisional pole instead. Oh, and let's not forget the championship battle was still ongoing back then, which makes this whole thing even more feisty. Still, you'd think that a team like Red Bull would have sorted this out by now, right? Like, Christian Horner has had a fair share of driver rivalries within his team, so he should be equipped to deal with this problem. And the fact that it has somehow surfaced months after the incident makes it more bizarre. Coming up, did Perez actually crash on purpose? Now, of course, claiming that Sergio Perez crashed to retain pole is a big deal. Like, he's a driver who's been an incredible team player over the course of his entire career. And this doesn't sound like something he'd do. That being said, there might actually be some truth to Verstappen's claims. After the incident in Brazil and all the news stories about the Monaco crash, analysts dug deep into that moment to see if there was any foul play involved. They studied the throttle curves for the Mexican over his laps in Monaco. And guess what? They found some pretty damning evidence. Now, if you don't know, drivers have to gradually apply the throttle when coming out of the corner before the tunnel section. And that's what Perez had been doing for the entirety of his quali session too, except that final lap. Apparently, the 32-year-old suddenly pushed hard on the accelerator out of nowhere, making his throttle curve go from 0 to 100 in an instant, rather than a gradual increase. And this, of course, resulted in him oversteering his car and spinning straight into the barriers. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes at Red Bull. That being said, it still doesn't justify the Dutchman's refusal to follow team orders. Also, to make matters worse, he did that over the team radio that's being broadcasted, which again is just going to add more fuel to the fire. Now for Sergio Perez's reaction to the situation. Following the Monaco Grand Prix, Max Verstappen's father, Jos, wrote a strange blog post in which he accused the team of favoring Perez, which, according to him, was disappointing. No one really knew what that was pointing toward, but now it seems like we finally have a clearer picture. Apparently, Red Bull never blamed the Mexican for that move and just asked everyone to move on and focus on the next race. Though little did they know that Verstappen would be holding that grudge for such a long time. That's the bizarre thing about it, though. Perez has done so much to facilitate the two-time champion that he shouldn't complain about such minor things. In fact, none of it mattered in the grand scheme of things. And to retain a P6 just out of sheer spite is just very petty behavior. And that's what Perez thinks as well. When the Dutchman didn't let him through during the race, he felt betrayed. What's more, he even went as far as saying on team radio that Verstappen's behavior showed who he really is. That was only the beginning of this spicy drama, though, because what happened in the interview pen was actual drive to survive level stuff. Speaking to the press after the race, the Mexican said that he didn't quite understand his teammates' reaction. Now, here's the stinger. He followed this up by saying, if Max has 2 championships, it's because of him. Yeah, we know. This is taking us all the way back to the Vettel-Weber rivalry. Following up, are the Mexican's claims actually true? Alright, Sergio attributing Max's titles to himself has definitely sent shockwaves. Is that actually true, though? Well, if you look at it from a certain angle, then sure. For instance, Verstappen didn't have the dominant car during his battle with Hamilton last year, and even though he won a bunch of races, most of them came as a result of some tactical masterclass from Red Bull. Guess who was making the sacrifices to counter the Silver Arrow's plans, though? Of course, it was Checo. The biggest example of his support, though, is obviously Abu Dhabi, where the Dutchman clinched the title. If you don't remember, it was the Mexican who kept running on his worn tires because he knew Hamilton was behind him. So he did the noblest of things any F1 wingman can do. He blocked the Brit, allowing Verstappen to catch up behind. Now, Sergio executed his defensive move so well that it earned him the title of Minister of Defense. Sure, he may not have had as much of a hand in the 25-year-old's second title, but you can't argue how instrumental he was in the first. Oh, and the Mexican seemed super disappointed at Interlagos too, saying how Max could have pulled this stunt after everything he's done for the team. That's how the cookie crumbles, though. As Red Bull finds itself in a tricky spot now, it looks like the trust between the two teammates is gone, and it's going to be interesting to see how they sort things out from this point. Finally, what's Red Bull going to do heading into Abu Dhabi? Driver rivalries and Red Bull. Name a better duo. Seriously, though, just how many times have they gone through these motions? Vettel and Weber, Max and Ricciardo, and now this. It's almost as if someone cast a curse on them, or perhaps they're just a one-driver team and leave the other guy hanging. Still, it looks like Christian Horner is already working overtime to sort the situation out before the season finale. After all, he probably doesn't want this to happen again, especially if a championship spot is on the line for Perez. In fact, the Red Bull team boss even said that they're going to do everything to secure P2 for Sergio, and apparently Max is going to support that as well. He then followed it up with the usual PR speech, saying that they work as a team and that everything's sorted. Whether the team has actually been closed on this brewing rivalry, though, remains to be seen. One thing's for sure, though, with Mercedes closing the gap to Red Bull, they really need to stay on their toes and sort this out before the next season. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think Verstappen was at fault for defying team orders? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.